Dulcimer Crossing. I'm Steve Yulberg, and post quarantine, I'm wearing this shirt partly because it's just so soft. It feels good, and I like it. Dulcimer Crossing is a venture that's been going for a dozen years that seeks to provide support for people who don't live where there are festivals and clubs. But we're excited to be around where people have festivals and clubs, but we want people to bridge the gap between what they know and where they want their music to grow. And our we have lessons that are recorded, we have live workshops, and we have this live stream. But here's what I'm excited about today. We are joined by Aaron May Lewis. And I'm going to pop back just for a minute. Hang on, Aaron May, because I want to show this. Our theme today is on the road again with a question mark and an exclamation point, because there's some stuff that goes with that. So, Aaron May, you are joining us not from your home studio today. Where in the world is Aaron May? Used to be Carmen Sandiego. Now it's Aaron May. Black Mountain, North Carolina. I like that place. It's a long way. Toto, we are not in Kansas anymore. So what brings you to Black Mountain, North Carolina? Oh, yeah, I forgot to
You'll
send
only
you
hear
there.
my voice.
I s-
Yeah.
for, I forgot to send you to the stream. You were in disembodied voice. Maybe you weren't in Black
Okay.
Mountain, but are you
I
now?
was. I was nowhere for just a second.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So North Carolina in the fall is so beautiful. And every year that I've come to the Black Mountain Music Festival, I think, man, I should spend a few extra days in the area. And this year we were able to kind of pull it together. So my husband and I drove, we left on Monday morning. Quarantine ended on Sunday evening. And we proceeded to pack everything and load the car and drive starting on Monday. So we were on the road all day Monday and Tuesday. And now we're settled into a cute little Airbnb and going to be up here for a few days before the festival starts on Saturday evening.
Well, that brings to what we want to focus on today is there are several different things about being an on the road musician
Yeah,
that were the case before the pandemic, disappeared during the pandemic, are
right.
returning. And so there's several different things we want to make sure we look at today that maybe if you're watching you may not have thought about, that is part of the life of traveling musicians, teaching musicians. Not everybody who travels and performs teaches. Not everybody who teaches travels and performs. But
Yeah.
Aaron May and I are some of those who do both. I wrote an article once called The Bread and Butter, Traveling and Teaching, the Bread and Butter of My Musical Career. That I don't know if I would be, I don't know if I could be, it could be sustainable or satisfying to do one or the other for me. And
Mm-hmm.
it seems as we've talked, that might be the case for you too.
Yeah, there's some magic that happens in these in person, face to face live events that is different. And, last month I did Feisty Kids Camp at the Walnut Valley Festival. And I was struck even more about the value of the kinesthetic learning for kids that happens in person. One of the things we do at that event is several opportunities for kids to touch and feel and play the instruments themselves. And so we do an instrument petting zoo with a variety of instruments. And we also have enough kids, mountain dulcimers, and ukuleles from various organizations in the region who are willing to let us use them, that we can actually let every kid play a dulcimer or a ukulele, and they learn to play a few chords together. And so that experience happens in a way that you can never do online because they have to have already had that instrument in their home for it to
Right.
be possible. or they just are watching someone play an instrument, which is such a different experience than playing it themselves. And likewise, like we do our best to do jamming online, and there've been some really amazing efforts to keep the jam kind of alive during the pandemic with groups like Send in the Music. But at the same time, there's nothing like actually sitting knee to knee with another musician and feeling the vibration of your instruments together. It's just really powerful in a way that you can't do online. So there's definitely some magic in person that's impossible to duplicate online. And vice versa, I think there's some magic online that's impossible to exactly replicate in person. And so
Well,
I think
for
there's an and both.
and both. um, when the Walnut Valley Festival gathers, how many people come to that?
10,000 ish
Okay.
over
And
the
when
course of the weekend.
people are coming to Black Mountain, they're expecting,
About 200
okay.
people.
But with a pandemic consciousness, you and I are both cancer survivors.
Yep.
And so being among people with immune systems which have, well, cancer means your body started attacking itself in some way. And so there's things that affect our immune systems forever.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean we're always immunocompromised in the way that someone with RA or something like that is immunocompromised. But it's a consideration, isn't it?
It is a consideration. It most definitely is. And one of my big considerations has also been the pre and post event time.
Mm,
There was a time as a traveling musician when I would book 3 or 4 events on the way to a big festival like the
yeah.
Black Mountain Music Festival. And then I would book 3 or 4 events on the way home from that festival. And part of my consideration now is if I get groups of people together 3 or 4 times on the way to an event and 3 or 4 times on the way home from an event, I'm dramatically increasing the risk that I become sort of a vector for other people
Mm.
as I am in different groups on a back to back kind of basis, and just that like overall levels of exposure. So I feel like I'm kind of in a place of leaning into working online pre and post, even kind of in the travel part, and then doing the event itself while allowing kind of a buffer zone on either side of it.
Well, let's talk about that online thing. Um, I started teaching in on Jam Play online in 2006, and a few years, and that was similar to the way Dulcimer Crossing is. We'd film lessons, we'd put the lessons up, and members got access to those, and then there were questions that came, that inevitably, and that's the in-person thing, right? People can ask
Right.
questions, you can answer, you can say no, 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 right quick. um, and what would happen, we discovered, is people would have questions like, we should have thought of that and added that in that lesson. It's too late now because it's already filmed. But what we can do is, off camera, you ask me the question that, Sleepy Dog 17 asked, and I can answer it. Or we'd have two teachers that would film our answers, and we get two different answers at the same time. But it's still happening so far away from when the question got asked that sometimes the questioner can't remember what they were thinking, feeling when the question got asked. And
Uh-huh.
and I did my master's in music ed degree all online from Boston University. I was the second cohort of the online group, and that's what my experience was, especially with the music theory class we took, the competency theory class, and the harmonic analysis class. I really longed to have a chalkboard and a person. I did have
Mhm.
proctor, I think is what was called, somebody that was in my time zone that we could more closely connect with each other, but it was still, I would ask my question on Tuesday and he'd answer it on Wednesday, but I wouldn't see it till Thursday, and I couldn't remember the context of my question. So I
Right.
have to go, I got to go back and read, what did I write to him as the question? What was I working on? Read his answer, try to decode it, and then get back to him. So it was a many-day process, which I found incredibly frustrating and not very effective for answering what it really was.
Yeah.
And possibilities for confusion, misinformation were abounded, right? Um,
Right.
but then Jamplay decided, let's have a live Q&A session. And so they said, how'd you like to sit? Would you be interested in taking your guitar and sitting in front of a computer for a few hours a day? And I thought, that sounds like the dumbest idea I've ever heard of. Who's going to want to do that? And how will they know I'm there? And I'll just be bored for 2 hours. What I didn't know is if I sat with a guitar in front of me, I would play it for 2 hours. That's a good thing. I did not count on that part. But
Uh-huh.
the
That's
first
what I heard when you said that. Sit in front of a camera with my instrument for 2 hours with no agenda? Yes.
well, I was thinking, how do you make money? How do you teach? How do you, all those other
Right.
things.
Right.
And
All the logistics.
and they said, well, we're going to pay you to do it. And I thought, okay. Well, we did it, and 30 people showed up from all around the world. It's like, wait a second. They had questions. And then they so that moved into a pattern of, I had a schedule for the first time we did it, 3 hours a day for 5 days a week. I was on the camera when I was at home, but then there'd be events when I'd need to leave. And what started to happen as the schedule shifted and I was just on 2 days a week, I had more freedom to leave. But that also meant, in planning my touring, can I get to a place? Will there be a place that will have Wi-Fi that'll work, that will let me use it, so that I can do my live Q&A from the road? And so
Yep.
I did it from your house. I
Yeah.
I did it from the seminary I went to in Columbus, Ohio, in their basement place. I did it from Vi's house when I was in Colorado recording with him. I did it. You and I have done it when we've been at somebody else's house for a house concert. And
Yep.
so we would, we would target our touring so that we could be in the place to do that at the appointed time.
I've
But,
done live streams from library conference rooms. That's another one.
oh, fun.
Hmm.
But there's always been a question, hasn't there?
Will it work?
Because we've been places where all of a sudden it didn't work and we're working off of a telephone hotspot,
Yep. Yep.
which may or may not work also.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it has, what has that done? What has that done for your thinking about it and doing it?
Well, I realized this morning that we have at this point sort of tested our travel technology setup several times in several different places, and it has worked. And there's still like a lack of trust that it will work that keeps me from planning it with anything that I feel like is like high stakes. So, for example, the Quarantine Dulcimer Festival was last weekend, and I had time post the Walnut Valley Festival that we could have done like a slow little trip out to Black Mountain and have already been here. But there was that question of, would the internet be good enough to actually stream my Quarantine live classes? And those feel like a high stakes kind of event, a high stakes moment where if it doesn't work, then I owe a bunch of people their money back, as opposed to something like this, where if it doesn't work, Steve does the live stream without me, and it's not the end of the world, and I have some private lessons scheduled for the rest of today. And again, if it doesn't work, I reschedule with that one person who has signed up for a lesson with me, and it's not the end of the world. But if it's a class that's got 15 people or 30 people signed up for it, then I have to try to accommodate all 30 people's schedule to try to like reschedule or give them their money back when it didn't work. So there's different kinds of levels of risk that I'm willing to take with doing online things on the road. But that is a conversation. Like every time we travel, my husband and I in the car on the way are talking about, how could we do this more often? How could we do this in a way that we're sure we can make the technology work every time? Like, let's keep practicing doing it. We want to get better at doing online work from anywhere, in part because the cost of getting to a place quickly is high. And so to get from Kansas to North Carolina in 2 days costs a lot relative to the amount of time, like days scheduled out for it. But if we did it kind of slowly and did do even one or two things, still with a buffer in between, and had online work in those in between buffer times, the cost of getting there would be less uh per event or per day or per trying to get out there, and so I don't know, we're thinking
Well,
about it.
let's talk about just the economics of it. When I took college economics, one of the things they talked was opportunity costs
Mm-hmm.
and fixed costs. There are things that we have that are fixed costs that are going to happen no matter where we are. There's going to have to be food, there's going to have to be lodging, there's going to have to be some other attendant things that I'm going to be paying for no matter where I am.
Right.
When I pick up and go, the things that are already covered at home, now I have to pay double for.
Correct. Right.
And then plus travel.
Mm-hmm.
So I have food in my refrigerator and in the pantry that is already bought and would cost me nothing more to eat. But when I travel, some of that will spoil. So I have to prepare. I mean, this is stuff that we all know, but I'm calling attention to it. And when I'm staying somewhere, it's not my bed. So I've got to pay somebody to, or ask someone. And
Right.
if it's asking someone, then we're in that bubble thing. We're with some
Yeah.
people in their bubble, and or energy wise, it does take energy. It's beautiful energy,
Yeah.
but staying with someone and having conversations and catching up, that is a thing. And sometimes it's a
Right.
stranger,
You're certainly not working on your business while you're in those moments where you're working with the people. And that's good. Everything isn't about working on your business, but that when you're talking about the economic cost of something, there's an economic cost in that, which is definitely pulling away from working on your business in that moment.
and so the previous model before the pandemic was um, airfare, and to get from Wichita to Black Mountain, North Carolina, how many flights would it take you?
To fly from Wichita to the closest airport to Black Mountain, which is Asheville, would be probably 3 flights, because there's very little direct, and it's small airport to small airport. I could get to Hickory, North Carolina, or Raleigh, Durham, or Knoxville, Tennessee in probably 2 flights. Um, but then I'm still 3 hours from my destination.
Which is arranging a ride or paying
Hmm.
for a car. And if you
Yeah.
arrange for a ride, when you get to the place, then you're stuck there. If or I mean, you don't have. wheels.
Right.
And
You don't have that
depending,
flexibility of
and
just hopping in the car and going to the store to get medicine when your allergies flare up, or
yes,
food when what's served is doesn't quite work with your dietary restrictions, or
right.
all of those things.
And it's not that any of those things are bad, and it's not that asking for a ride. I mean, there's lovely things we've both experienced
Yeah.
in in that, um, when going with that range of things. But I think what we're saying is there. What it also meant is completely hard stop to what happens at home to go do this thing,
Right.
and then come
Yes.
back and have to re-enter and pick up again
Hmm.
while dealing with all the follow-up that, um, is needed after every event,
Right.
um, and then forgetting some of it because of the crossover. And
Hmm.
not it's not the most efficient thing. It's,
Right.
I think we have both been grateful to have these careers that we have and to carve them out the
Exactly.
way we've put them together.
Yeah. Yep.
But always looking for ways that they don't have to be as hard.
Right. We both have worked with Emily Ann Peterson, and one of the things she taught me to look for is where there's friction, and
Mm.
then to identify if there is friction here, is there something I can do to reduce the friction? Is the friction helping me grow? Like what? But to really look for the friction places, and then um, look for what's around the friction. And and I think that is something that in some ways the pandemic forced us to look at in a way that we might not have ever slowed down enough to observe.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I The thing with the friction, every time she mentioned that, I always think of also traction, because friction is a piece of traction to
Hmm.
get your footing. And so is this friction which is resistance, or is this friction which helps traction? And you do have to be able to just reflect upon it. And if you're in a hamster wheel, there's no reflecting upon anything. You're just
Right.
going, right? And if you stop your body while the wheel keeps going, blah, 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 blah. We've all seen the hamster that did that. Maybe we've all been the hamster that does that.
Uh-huh. I think so.
Um, uh, um, Jim is asking, there's a sunk cost, and I've invested this much in a project. I can't quit now, without realizing that those costs are sunk. You can't get back. So now it's, what's the cost to complete the project now that I start now? I think that is an important piece of this overall puzzle too,
Yeah.
um, because it's not just money. We're investing our energy and our gifts, skills, talents, experience, life in something. And I I just got a new gig as the interim director, music director of a church, and I really loved the way the pastor introduced my presence to the congregation on Sunday. It was the first Sunday I was there, when he said, "Steve is someone who has invested his life and energy in equipping other people to uh, to be be musicians for the good of the world." And I just love that broad. Yes, that's what I do. And
Hmm.
um and whether or not that reaps returns that match that is a thing I've got to wrestle with all the time. We all do. Um
Right.
but the purpose of what I do is not to reap the rewards. It's for that purpose.
Yeah. And I think that I've been sort of having the conversation a lot lately about the difference between having sort of a values driven business path versus a purely economic or purely like followers based or growth based or whatever. And I think that the world is always changing. I'm looking around right now, and some of the in-person dulcimer festivals that tried to come back this year um, didn't weren't able to do it. they canceled at the last minute because they had low registration. And I'm thinking, what is this going to do for our community when our small little in-person events don't have enough people coming to them? But
Mm-hmm.
also the cost of traveling to a festival, which, for me, I'm looking at from my own sort of business of will this pay in whatever way. But participants are also having to look at it. And there's no doubt that we're in a season where people are tightening their budgets because the cost of milk and gasoline is higher than it was a year ago. And so how are we adjusting for that? And it can look scary if your model is playing in-person festivals is what I do, or if your model is, teaching online is what I do, or your model is this one thing, like trying to grow this one thing is what I do, then it can get scary when it looks like that might not grow. But when you have sort of a value centric of like, my value is to equip other people, to
Mm-hmm.
equip kids, to expose the folk music to people, like, these are the values that we have, then the place you do that and the way you do that can be ever changing.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't feel like everything is changing. At least that's been my experience. Like, yes, the exact way that I do this work is ever changing, but the heart of the work hasn't changed. And so, whether I'm looking at a computer screen, or I'm in person with a large group of people, or I'm in person one on one with a small group, whether I'm staying in people's homes or getting an Airbnb, like, it doesn't feel like it's a huge difference.
I think you're right. And it goes against the conventional wisdom, or it has been purported to be conventional wisdom, that you really we're always best if we just focus on this one thing, we'll get the best result. And the
Mm-hmm.
reality is, with playing music, there's never just one thing to focus on. I mean,
No.
by mountain dulcimer, two hands, hammer dulcimer, two hands, you're not in the same realm of, if I just put all my energy into this one basket. And there are times when that makes sense, right? I really need to
Sure.
work on my right hand. I really need to work on fingering accuracy. I need to work on hammering accuracy or hand separation. All of these things are pieces of the puzzle that can take attention for a time. But if that's all I ever did, um, I would. There's a place in which you got to step back. It's like I'm looking at this little caterpillar on this little leaf, on this twig, on this branch, on this limb, on this tree, in this forest. And if I never look at the forest, I mean, there's something really cool about seeing that little caterpillar. But if I never see it in the context of the forest, um, I I have the capacity for both. Why not use it? I guess that's the and
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's the sort of balancing juggling, right? We're never probably gonna be perfectly balanced or juggle all the balls perfectly, because there's always something that I'm not doing. No
Well,
matter what I'm doing, there's always something I'm not doing.
and what I love about the image of juggling, there is no juggler alive who hasn't dropped the ball.
Yeah.
And so the fearing dropping the ball cannot be you'll never throw the ball up if you're afraid you're going to drop it. You can't worry about that. And that always takes me back to when Michael Jordan decided he's going to play. He retired from basketball and going to play professional baseball, which is what he always wanted to do. It's what he loved. It's what his dad loved. His dad had just been kidnapped and killed, and the trauma in the family. And he decided, I'm going to play baseball. And somebody says, well, what if you fail? He said, I'm not afraid of failing.
Yeah.
And it's, if you're afraid of failing, you'll never do it. And so many
Right.
of us
The
approach
other
our music
question
that
is,
way.
what if you never try?
Yeah, yeah. Um, and I think that's the biggest barrier that most students I experience run up against, is I'm afraid I'm going to fail. It's like, I'm not afraid of that. I I can fail spectacularly. Yes, it bothers me to do that, but it bothers me more not to try.
Right.
And that's why I always say that we don't work music.
Mm-hmm.
Kids play. They don't work. They play. And when they look at you with their eyebrows and they're going like this, there's no way to fail at this. We're going to have fun.
Right. It's discovery and exploration. It's it's not even succeed or fail. It's what can you find here?
Yeah. 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 And
That's
that's
what I'm here for.
how do you,
I'm just on a big adventure looking to see what I can discover along the way. And
Aaron's
some of
grand
my
adventure?
explorations lead me to places where I think, I might not want to come back to this place. But sometimes
Yeah.
I discover magic.
Yeah. Yeah. Now in the comments, some people are talking about what is it a step back to run smaller festivals with fewer teachers and things like that, which is what Nutmeg did this year, as Jamie pointed out. That and it seems to me, I've not talked with Sam about what their experience was, but it seemed as they said in their promo, they wanted to right size it. And
Yeah.
they wanted to focus on the things that are best happening in person instead of
Mhm.
doing all the things. And I I hope it went well because it seemed to me like a wise move.
Yeah, me
You
too.
know,
I
the
thought it
proof
was
is
really, really beautifully articulated what they were trying to do as well.
and when I was thinking about this because Bing had been at that festival and he was in Virginia for the Quarantine Festival. So that whole question of technology on the
Right.
road, and he was in a campground.
Yeah.
And he did have some issues at times, and he would just say, I'm on a Wi-Fi, and I've done all this. I've done everything, and this is where I am. And then he didn't let that distract. I mean, Bing is on the same adventure, right? And
Yeah.
he didn't let any hiccups like that get in the way of the adventure
Yeah.
and the celebration of what's happening. And like you, he was an MC for a concert.
Yeah. Right. And then you just say, you know what? We're doing our best with what we have. And now we move on.
Yeah,
Which we have to do in person too, because I mean, there can be this sense of like, well, if it's online and something goes wrong, then we have failed in some way. But when we're in person, things go wrong too.
yes.
So it's not like, oh, this is a big surprise that everything didn't work perfectly. It's just how life is.
Yes. Things didn't go according to plan.
Hmm.
Oh, well, um, anything else that we're at our time? Is there anything else that you're thinking about that is a piece of this on the road again? Question mark, exclamation point.
Well, I just want to say that at least in this moment, right now, today, the exclamation point is feeling stronger than the question mark.
Oh, good.
I'm feeling eager and optimistic about um, being on the road again as a thing that's like good and positive and healthy and doesn't have to be the only thing. I don't think online um, events are going anywhere, but I think there can be an and about them, and that does make me feel a lot more excited than the feeling of trepidation that even 6 months ago I held more of about being on the road.
Uh-huh.
So exclamation mark is winning for me.
All right. All right. And being in Idaho, which is further away from everybody else, um, means there's more question mark for me because people
Mhm.
keep asking, "Are you? We'll see you at the next in person." It's like I don't know. Number one, if I'll get invited, I don't know if I'm invited that I'll be able to afford to go.
Right.
I don't. I really wanted to go to Winfield this year, and I was working on all the travel plans to do it. It was going to be a considerable haul, and then I got a new knee instead. So that made the considerable haul impossible and
Yeah.
unwise. And
We missed you.
yeah, thank you. But the longing to be there and the sadness with missing being there is still real.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I'm not going to make plans again. But when you're in the territory that Lewis and Clark took a few years to try to get to and explore, it makes it, going to the thing is going to be a big deal. And but it's not going to be necessarily a regular deal. And
Right.
so that I'm finding it out too. We're all finding it out.
Yay
So
for adventures.
yay for adventures, yes. And thank you for being adventurous and willing to schedule trying to do this from a new location.
It's been
Thanks
fun.
thanks to Vimeo for making this possible. There are other platforms that do it, but that's the one we use. And thanks to Dulcimer Crossing for also making it possible. And if you want to come
Yay.
by, ask me about, we still have time, ask about the Quarantine special, because we have special offers for this quarantine season. If you want to, if you're interested or just intrigued about Dulcimer Crossing, you can get half off of your first month. But ask me about that, and I can send you the location where you can do that and join us and partake of the lessons and the live stream. And the live workshop this month, it'll be Christian Hewitt. Next month, it'll be Marilyn Michael. And or private lessons. We have those as availability too. So,
Yeah.
well,
Awesome.
thanks there, May.
Thank
Have
you.
a great time and at the festival. Tell all the people hi.
I sure will.
Pick the tunes and jam with them.
Deal.
And this, as always, will be archived on the Facebook page, our Vimeo page, and YouTube, as well as in Dulcimer Crossing, where it's curated. And we'll see
Awesome.
you next time.